Hi everyone, I'm Sharon and welcome back to my YouTube channel. Today I'll be creating a fall-themed slimline card that features a blessing of unicorns enjoying a Thanksgiving picnic deep in the heart of a magical forest. So let's get started with a quick overview of the Fawn products that I use to create this card. I use the unicorns and some of the sweet desserts from the Unicorn Picnic stamp, the large tree stump, Thanksgiving dishes, and the words Thanksgiving from the Forest Feast stamp set. A variety of leaves from the You Autumn Know stamp set, the unicorn from A Little Sparkle, the pie from Cutie Pie, the scripty happy from the Happy 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 stamp set, the Woodgrain Backdrop, the stitched Hillside borders, and the Grassy Hillside borders. I take the large leaves from the You Autumn Know and I stamp them onto a piece of Strathmore Bristol Smooth cardstock that measures 1.5 by 8.5 inches. Using some sticky notepaper, I cut out about 3 masks per leaf. I stamp a leaf and then I place one of my sticky note masks over top of it before I stamp the leaf again. Each time, before I stamp the next leaf, I mask the previous leaf and change the angle of the leaf stamp so that I get a different look. I alternate between 3 different leaves to create this leafy border, which I was initially intending on using as a leafy border ground for my critters to walk on. Later, you will see that I decide against using this as a leafy border, but use it as a bunch of leaves for my trees instead. To create the feel of a magical forest, I decided against using traditional fall colors for my leaves. Instead, I decide on a combination of purples, turquoises, yellows, and greens, which one would typically not see in a regular forest. As I am coloring, I try to avoid coloring any 2 side-by-side leaves the same color. I'm coloring with my Ohuhu alcohol brush markers, and my images are stamped in Lawn Fawn jet black ink, which is safe for alcohol marker coloring. I don't have to worry about any bleeding of the ink or any smudging. After I finish coloring, I fussy cut out my leaf border using my Tim Holtz snips. A tip for easier and more precise fussy cutting is to move the paper as you cut instead of moving the scissors. This allows for greater control over cutting out around the small details. Next, I die cut a 2.5 by 4.25 inch piece of Bristol smooth cardstock using the Woodgrain Backdrop. After ink blending the trunks with Vintage Photo Distress Oxide, I use some seedless preserved distress oxide on the edges of the trunks. This will help tie in the purple from the leafy border I colored in with my alcohol markers. I give the trunk some shape by cutting it in line with its grain, and then I cut the trunk in half so that it can serve as 2 tree trunks that flank the 2 sides of my magical forest scene. I was originally going to use my leafy border to ground my critters, but as I was figuring out my design, I felt that having all of those leaves on the ground looked too busy and that my critters would get lost in the leaves. So I decided to cut the leafy border into smaller pieces and to use the pieces as foliage on my trees instead. Next, I use my 6-inch Grassy Hillside border resourcefully to create an 8.5 inch border. I run the border through my die cutting machine. Then I butt the border up against the first cut and run the border again through the die cutting machine a second time, and I do the same thing with the matching stitched hillside border. I ink blend the stitched hillside border using Vintage Photo and Seedless Preserved Distress Oxide to provide some color continuity with the tree trunks. I smush some Vintage Photo onto my work surface, spritz it with some water, and create some splatters for some added texture. To add another magical color element to the card, I use fossilized amber distress oxide for the grassy hillside and splatter on some salty ocean distress oxide for contrast. On a 3.5 by 8.5 piece of Strathmore Bristol smooth cardstock, I ink blend Salty Ocean in a light circular motion. I want to create the illusion of fluffy clouds and add salvage patina for a touch of turquoise. I load my sentiments into my Misty stamping tool, ink them up with some VersaFine Onyx Black Pigment ink, which is an ink that takes a little longer to dry, but makes it perfect for heat embossing. I stamp the sentiment onto a purple piece of Fawn textured dot gemstone cardstock to tie it in with the magical purple leaves on the trees. I sprinkle on some clear embossing powder, and I use my heat tool to melt the powder to reveal a bright, shiny sentiment. Then I use the coordinating die and an everyday sentiment banner to cut out the sentiment. Now for the fun part of assembling the card. First, I adhere the grassy border, then I flank the scene with the 2 tree trunks. Then I lay the stitched hillside border down, and then I soon thereafter work on building my scene. For the card base, I have a piece of accent opaque 120-pound heavyweight cardstock that I score at the 3.5 mark on the 7-inch side. I decide to continue the sentiment onto the inside of the card so that the entire sentiment of the card reads, "Happy Thanksgiving. So thankful for each moment with you." Using a white gel pen, I add in some white details to each of my colored images. This creates more interest and dimension to the overall scene. Then I put some liquid adhesive onto the back of the card front, adhere it to the card base, and here we have it, my finished card. This fall-themed slimline card features a blessing of unicorns enjoying a Thanksgiving family picnic deep in the heart of a magical forest. And they're sending a message to the card's recipient that says, "Happy Thanksgiving. So thankful for each moment with you." Thank you so much for joining me in this card making video today. If you enjoyed this video, please hit the like button and subscribe to my channel. I hope that you will join me again next time. Have a great day, everyone. Bye-bye.